Hello my friends, welcome back to Refit and Sail. My name's George Isted, the Solent Boat Butler. This is a Contessa 32, this is Project Lottie, and as you can see, there is no rudder here. That's because it's in my workshop. I'm just finishing it off now. This is the second part of a Project Lottie update, because I'm going to pop up in a minute and show you a few other items that I forgot to show you at the start of last week's video. And we are going to finish off this rudder here that you can't see. So we're going to finish off that rudder. There's lots of filling and fairing and sanding. So if that's your thing, please do stay tuned for more Project Lottie action. So in last week's episode, as I said, I showed you quite a lot of what has been happening, but I didn't remember to show you absolutely everything. So I'm going to show you a few other bits just to update you on the project. In last week's episode, I cracked on with getting on with the rudder. So that had been peeled some many months ago as part of the osmosis treatment on the bottom of this boat. All the osmosis treatment was done on this boat, but I didn't get around to finishing the rudder. So in last week's episode, it got a rough sand all over. It had some glass laid up over the top of it. Had 2 coats of epoxy and biax glass laid up over the top of the rudder, and we're about to rejoin the action where I have to prep all that and start doing all the filling and all the fairing to get that back to a chef kiss perfect finish so it can go back on the boat. But before it goes back onto the boat, all this is going to get copper coat, and I want to copper coat the rudder at the same time as I copper coat the hull, and I'm going to do that with the rudder off the boat because it means that I can copper coat in all these little recesses that would be otherwise very difficult to get to. But that's the subject of another video. This video is going to start with a bit of an update up the top. So here's a view you don't normally see, me climbing up the actual ladder to Lottie, and I need to unlock, and oh, spoiler alert, there are some winches, but that is the subject of another video. So let's unlock and I'll take you inside. The first update is on the engine. I have now fitted some exhaust stuff behind there. There we go, it's a slightly better view. This is the access that I have into the engine bay. I've got to finish off just taping up the edges of this sand insulation, but you can see there is finally an exhaust hose. There's also in here, this thing here is a temperature sensor for an alarm system, which is the subject of a separate video, so stay tuned for that. I've also fitted a brand new Vetus waterlock, that's the grey thing there, and a new exhaust which runs all the way to the back of the boat with a nice big swan neck up inside the cockpit locker right at the stern. If we stick the camera right in, you'll see there wasn't previously a prop shaft, but we now have a brand new prop shaft with a brand new stern gland. It's a dripless seal. It's very similar to a Volvo seal, that one. It's a Radace seal, and you can either vent it to atmosphere or you can pressure feed it from the water system on the engine. It also has a semi-flexible coupling there, so everything on the prop shaft side of things is all fitted. I have got a brand new Darglow feathering prop to fit on that prop shaft, but I'm not going to be fitting that until the boat has its copper coat anti-fouling. So again, stay tuned for that. Now, whilst I am up the quarter berth, which isn't terribly comfortable, there is also this thing here. So let me tell you what we have installed here. I'll try and angle the camera slightly up so you can see a Sterling alternator to regulator charger. Now, what is one of these things? You've possibly seen them on the channel before. It basically turns your alternator into a smart charger, and it includes the ability to split the charge across 2 different banks of batteries. Now, I fitted numerous ones of these. It's a way of massively boosting the efficiency of your battery charging system. It doesn't work with lithium, mostly, because there isn't any protection for the alternator in there. But if you're using lead acid batteries, in the case of this boat, we've got some really nice high quality AGMs. This is a fantastic solution which massively speeds up the charging of those with a standard regulator. These are also really good if you've got a brand new engine and you don't want to start messing about with the internals of your alternator. These do not require any alteration to the alternator itself, unlike some of the other Sterling products which require you to rewire, put some new wires into the alternator. I won't go into the details because it's very boring, but this retains the warranty on your existing alternator because you just take the alternator output into there on this side, and then it has two positives coming out up there which go off to your two banks of batteries. There's a temperature sensor which you can stick on the alternator, there's a temperature sensor you can stick on the batteries, and it does everything else. It's a magic box of tricks, and they're really actually pretty blimmin' good. If you're interested, I am not sponsored by Sterling in any way, shape or form, but they have offered a discount code for Refit and Sale viewers. So if you go to the Sterling shop, you can order items and get a 20% discount if you use the discount code Refit and Sale 20. I'll put it on the screen and down in the description, and that applies to all their products apart from lithium batteries. On those you can use Refit and Sale 10 and you'll get a 10% discount on those. So any of these sort of products, alternator to battery chargers, battery to battery chargers, solar panels, and a whole host of other stuff from Sterling, you can get 20% off with Refit and Sale 20. So thank you, Sterling, for offering that. The other thing that's been happening is the installation of new equipment and lots of wiring. Tucked in here behind the B&G VHF is a Raymarine AIS transponder, which includes a splitter, so that has gone in. You can also see, if you look up there, the start of the Seatalk NG network. In the case of this, that's the Raymarine Seatalk NG network, which is NMEA 2000, but different plugs and different sockets. The rest of the stuff on the boat will be NMEA 2000 kind of native, which is all the B&G stuff, but as part of this, it's also getting a Raymarine autopilot, an Evolution pilot, so I'll show you that. If we go up into the cockpit, tucked in the corner here, here is the control head for the Raymarine Evolution pilot. It's still got its protective plastic on there. That's a sensible place to have it, because chances are you'll have your RAM attached in the cockpit there, so you're going to be sitting on the starboard side, so you can then just hit auto and connect it up. I have fitted the EV1 sensor tucked up in here, so inside one of the cupboards up high, so that should work great there, and you can see the data cabling coming down from it. So what we also have tucked right up here under the quarter berth, there is the third part of the built-in autopilot system. So that's the ACU 100, which is the appropriate ACU for an Evolution Pilot system on a Contessa 32. Now, I'm not absolutely wedded to Raymarine, B&G or any other particular manufacturer, but I do know that Evolution pilots from Raymarine do work particularly well. I had an Evolution Pilot kit on my Contessa, and I raced that single-handed and did lots and lots of miles in it, and it worked brilliantly. It's also one of the few really good pilots which is a built-in system that seems to work very well without a rudder reference system. Now, rudder references are generally required by autopilot systems, and they do work better if you can manage to put a rudder reference in. Somehow, through magic and electronics, the Evolution pilot seems to work really, really well on a tiller steered boat without that rudder reference. I've also got an Evolution pilot on my sailboat, my cruising boat, the Westerly, which is wheel steered, and that does have a rudder reference, and that has done literally thousands and thousands of miles under the Evolution pilot, and it's been absolutely brilliant. So as I said, not sponsored by Raymarine, but I do rate that pilot. It does work extremely well. I imagine there are a few other things which I have done on the boat which I haven't shown you because I can't remember them all, and I don't particularly plan these videos, but those are the main things that I think I missed out of last week's update. Anyway, I think without further ado, I will take you back to the workshop, probably rewinding about 2 weeks from now, and I might be clean shaven or I might be not, who knows. Good continuity, where you can see how I take the rudder for this boat from freshly laminated with glass through to a finished, beautiful, nicely faired and filled rudder that can be. This is all cured, so we are all good. So I'm going to pull off this peel ply, and under it, very satisfying pulling this off, just in case you haven't ever done it. I don't know why it's so satisfying, but it is. Oh, lovely. Right, so we can pull all this off, and we can see that there is a bit of trimming. Oh, there's a bit of trimming required. It's actually quite hard pulling this off, particularly because it's wibble wobbling around. Oh man. Well, you can see I've got glass here that all needs trimming. I've got to trim all the way around here so I can get this support off. And because I don't like making dirt in this, which is my clean room, in theory, clean room, it's not that clean. I'm going to take this outside, trim around here with an oscillating tool, trim around there with an oscillating tool, and then I'm going to take a sander to this and just buzz off the occasional high spot that I can see and just shape the back edges a little bit, and then we are into filling and fairing. So I am going to use the same epoxy that I used on this, so I know that everything is 100% compatible. This particular epoxy, one of the reasons I use it, as well as it doesn't suffer from amine blush at all, is that whilst it does an initial cure, it then continues curing over about 3 days. So if you use the same epoxy again over the top, you get, to a degree, a chemical bond between the layers. So that's why I want to crack on with getting some filler on this, because I'm going to use the same epoxy. I'm going to thicken it up with some thickening filling agents. Let's get it all on there, make it sort of smooth-ish, and then leave that to cure again, and I'll come back to it tomorrow. It is going to take at least 3 filling and sanding sessions to get this the shape that I want it. So this first fill is going to be just a case of getting a load of material on and getting it roughly to the right shape, and taking it from there and finessing it over the next couple of days. So if you like filling and you like sanding, you are in the right place. That's all the initial prep work done. So you saw me buzzing around the edges with an angle grinder with a flat disc on it. I think it was a 60 grit flat disc, and that just took the bulk of what I wanted to get off. And then I came in with my Merca sander, which had an 80 grit disc on it, or a few 80 grit discs, just to buzz over this. There was a bit of a high spot here on both sides, just where the glass overlapped, where I had to put the layers on top of each other, so that's been sanded back and is reasonably flush now. I can't feel any obvious lumps or bumps there. So this has now been wiped down with acetone, vacuumed all over, so it's as clean as it's going to get. I shouldn't really be touching it with my bare hands, but I have just washed my hands so they're not oily or greasy. And I'm going to mix up some fairing compound on this, so I'm going to be using exactly the same epoxy. I'm going to be thickening it up with a mixture of West System low density filler, whatever this is called, 407, which is the brown stuff if you've seen it. The other thing that I mix in with it, so I use a bit of that, and I use a bit of this stuff called Q-Cell, which is a really lightweight filling compound as well, which is easy to sand, easier to sand even than the West System stuff. And I use that quite a lot, pretty effectively, the two combined together. I've been thinking about how I'm going to apply it. I was initially going to do it hanging up, and then I thought, no, I'm not going to do that because it's going to wobble around too much. But I've had a play with this filling knife, which I use to apply stuff and get it reasonably flat. But what I actually want to use is this thing here, which is a tool made by a company called FlexiSander. I've been using them for a while, and they're really good because they conform to the shape that you want and allow you to apply material but get it reasonably flat. And I think if I get it all on there, I can then bring this in and either run it up the way or run it down. Up is better because the material collects on here, and I'll hopefully be able to get this reasonably flat what's on there, because obviously the less that's on there, the less sanding I have to do, but there has to be enough on there to build up the surface to the level I want. There's quite a big dip in there, there's a little bit of a dip there, and this is ever so slightly concave in places, and I want to bring that surface up to be pretty flat. So I think I'm going to have to put the time lapse back on. I hope you don't mind that, dear viewers, and mix up some epoxy and thicken it up, get it on here, and then it's going to be a cup of tea time. Well, as you can see, I have got filler over the whole thing, but as you probably also saw, I struggled, as it turns out, to use my FlexiSander. It just doesn't really work when the thing you're using is kind of moving around. I couldn't really hold it with one hand and do this, because this really works best when you can have two hands to kind of smush the stuff about. But anyway, I've done the best I can. I'm going to let that cure. I'm cleaning up all my tools. I've also got to clean some epoxy off my gimbal for my camera mount, and I'm going to come back tomorrow, give this all a buzz over and see where I'm looking on it. I think what I'm going to do on the next layers is what I've done before on these rudders, is actually just to have it down flat and do one side at a time. It just doesn't really work trying to do two sides at a time when you're really trying to finesse it. But that will do for now. It's a good starting point. I've managed to obviously fill that big divot there, and once it's sanded I'll have a view of how flat it is. So watch this space for more sanding tomorrow. It is Thursday today, and this is all cured, so I can run my fingers over it. It's always good to test if this is cured before you start sanding. You just need a little bit of sandpaper, which I have got right here, and you just want to make sure that when you sand it, you're getting a nice kind of fine dust, and this is just about sandable, I would say. So I'm going to knock that down and do the next fill. So what am I going to use to sand this? I'm going to be doing it with two different tools. So this is the hard work way of doing it. This is another FlexiSander product. It has a bar in here, so this is absolutely dead straight, or I can take that bar out and it will flex to the surface. Now, use this in two different ways. When you want it absolutely flat, leave the bar in, because I want this front edge to be absolutely as flat as it can. I want the sides to be fairly flat, but when it comes to finishing off, you might want a little bit of curvature in it when you're kind of going over the edges, which do have curvature on them. The easier way of doing it, but it's not quite as accurate because this is obviously very long, this longboard, is to use my electric longboard. Now it's a bit shorter, I think it's about 18 inches long. You can see the difference there if I hold the two up. Again, it's a FlexiSander product, not sponsored by them, but I have been using their products for 4 or 5 years, I guess, something like that. I'm going to be doing some sanding with this in that direction, and obviously in that direction, just to knock all this down. The danger is you take off too much, so you just want to have a straight edge to be able to kind of put against what you're sanding, just to see how far you have got. But as I said yesterday, this is the first of a number of fills, and I was never going to get it done all in one. I suspect it'll be 3 fills, it may well be 4. I can't put it off any longer. I'm going to suit up, mask up, take this out there and do some sanding. What I did learn yesterday was when you get epoxy on your camera mount, your gimbaling camera mount, you do not use acetone to clean it off because it melts the plastic. And I've now got a new gimbal mount on order because I managed to glue the button to the casing on my gimbal, which is what I'm speaking to you on now. I've sort of made it sort of work by butchering it with a sharp knife. But if you want to help financially support this show and help me pay for the new gimbal mount that I've just ordered, you can do so. There's a link down in the description. And to those of you that support the show financially, thank you very, very much. I really do appreciate it. If you don't want to do that, that's no stress. Just hit that thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button as well. It really does genuinely help grow this channel. Thank you very much if you have done that. Well, the good news is that did not take anywhere near as long as I thought it was going to do. Now, you might be looking at this and thinking, well, I've hardly sanded it. There's all this area in the middle that I haven't sanded. Well, you're right, but I've done that on purpose because that area in the middle is concave and I want to bring it up so we've got a completely flush finish here. I've been using my sander with the bar in so I know it's completely flat and just sanding across it like this. Anything that it doesn't touch is too low and needs building up. So I've got the same on both sides. I've also got the same here, a little bit here, and so I'm going to do a little bit of filling. Now, as I probably said yesterday, I can't remember, I don't plan these videos. As I probably said yesterday, this particular epoxy I can overcoat and get a chemical bond if I do it within a certain window, and I'm well within that, so I could just apply epoxy filler over the top of this using the same epoxy and it will get a chemical bond as well as a physical bond. To aid that bond, I am just going to scuff this up a little bit by hand, just using a bit of 80 grit, just like that. Doesn't need to be any more than that on any shiny bits, just to aid that bond. As I said, there should be a chemical bond, but this will also help get a bit of a mechanical bond as well between the layers of filler. Well, before I do too much more, I'm going to give this a big wipe down with acetone, some rag, just to get off any dust, and I've been touching it with my bare hands, and even the oil off your bare hands, if it's a warm day, can stop things adhering to your workpiece. So it's well worth always wiping down and then wearing gloves afterwards, and obviously wear gloves whilst you're handling acetone because it's horrible, horrible stuff. It really dries out your skin and yeah, nasty. So once that is done, I'm going to mix up some epoxy and I'm going to use this big filling knife. I'll initially apply it with a smaller scraper, but this is my friend, and what I'm going to be doing is initially filling over the back here, which is just out of shot, but I've got some low points on the leading edge here, so I'm just going to bring that up like that over the edge. But then I want to fill this hollow here, and I'm going to be doing that by running it along the two edges, which are high, and pulling it down like this, and that will remove all the excess material, and this shouldn't take too long just to get that on, so I'm going to give it a wipe down and get cracking. So I buy acetone in very large drums, but I then decant them into these little handy bottles because it's kind of convenient, and get plenty on there, and then whoop, got it all over the thing. That's fine. And give it a really good wipe down, turn the cloth over, give it another wipe, and it's removing all the dust, but more importantly it's removing any kind of greasy oily things that might be on there from my skin from touching it, or you know, if I'd spilt some oil or something like that on the workbench out there, this should remove it. There we go. Now I'm not going to do the other side yet because I will do that when I do the next fill. Done. In the bin. Well folks, a few days have passed and I thought I would save you the deep joyous pleasure of watching me fill and sand and fill and sand and fill and sand. I know there's another famous YouTuber that does enjoy a bit of sanding and showing it on the YouTube, and good luck to him. He's a really nice guy, but you know, sanding is pretty boring, to be perfectly honest with you, from my point of view as someone who is a professional sander a lot of the time. But anyway, this has had, and I'm crouching down so you can see it and me, this has had 3 coats of filler all over, sanding in between coats, each one progressively getting the surface up to the level that I want. And then yesterday it had its final little smush about of filler on the blade, both sides, just to fill in any little imperfections. So this is basically done, apart from it needs one more sand just to knock down any high spots. If I find any further minor imperfections, I will deal with them afterwards, because once this blade is done, I've got to deal with what's going on right up here, where the stock enters the rudder, and down here where the stock comes out of the rudder and it attaches to a little stainless bracket which is hanging from the roof at the moment. Here is a shot of the stainless steel stock going into the rudder, and one of the problems that we have with rudders generally, this isn't specific to Contessa rudders, is getting a half decent seal between the stock and the rudder. And it typically is the case that rudders get very wet inside because water enters into the rudder where the stock goes in, and in the case of a Contessa, where the stock actually comes out as well, down the bottom end here. And whilst the top actually doesn't look too bad, the bottom part looks pretty disgusting. There's all sorts of little voids and things in there, so I'm going to clean off this filler and do something with that. So the other issue, as you can possibly make out, is that this, where the rudder kind of ends, is not at 90 degrees to the stock. So that's the other thing that I'm going to fix with the aid of gravity, but I'll come on to that after some sanding. That is it, all sanded. So we are pretty much finished on this blade. There's a tiny little fill I'm going to have to do on the other side. I don't know if you can see it on the camera where it's just slightly low, so I'm going to just smush a bit more in there. But I want to do some stuff here. So my plan is, and I've done this on a few Contessa rudders, is to get my little Dremel, which is not a Dremel, it's a Bosch, but I think they're actually owned by the same company. I think Dremel is owned by Bosch now. I'm going to come in here. You can see the bit I've got on the end there. It's kind of a pointy bit. And I'm going to come in and grind away some of the glass fibre, some of the material around the stock. And this will give a nice coarse finish. It'll also roughen up the stainless steel stock. And then I'm going to stand this upright and do a pour of neat epoxy, so unthickened epoxy, down into that crack all the way around, and hopefully some of that will soak down, and what doesn't will cure on the top and hopefully give me a pretty good seal around the stock. I'm going to do the same on the bottom as well. Once that has cured, I'll be able to clean it up, and then the whole thing will get its coating of a barrier coat, and the barrier coat will also go up and slightly over the stock as well. So with those two things going on, hopefully we've got this pretty well sealed. At least that's the plan. As I said, I've done it a few times. I haven't had any rudders back yet, so hopefully that will do the job nicely. As you can see, I have just set the rudder up, kind of clamped to the vise and clamped to the workbench there. It is completely vertical, or as vertical as I can make it. There is the little bit of filling that I need to do. You can see there's a slightly low spot there, so I'm going to just do a tiny little fill on there. But what I'm more concerned with at the moment is what I'm doing at the top here. So this has all been ground out, so I've gone down about 10 mil down into the rudder stock, and you can peek right down into there. I've also scuffed up the stainless steel shaft, the stock, as much as I can, and so I'm now going to mix up some epoxy and just basically do a pour of neat epoxy down into this gap here, and that's why I want this absolutely vertical. I'm going to put some tape around here just as kind of like a dam, so that if I overfill slightly, it's not the end of the world, it's not going to start dribbling down, and I can always sand back any excess once it's all cured. I'm going to do exactly the same process down at the bottom once the bit at the top has cured. You can see the bit down at the bottom down there. Right, so epoxy mixed up, and when I say pour, I'm going to give it a go. And just get this to work its way around. And gravity is going to hopefully do its thing, and that will settle nice and flat and square in the recess that I've made there. I'll just put a teeny tiny little dribble more. You can see my little tape, masking tape dam. If I get a little bit on the stock, it's not the end of the world, because I can remove it afterwards quite easily. Fill that I also needed to do on the blade. It's now the next day, and I've just come into the workshop and taken the tape off that was around here, and you can see, if I angle the phone correctly, you can see this almost clear layer of epoxy all the way around here. Now I'm going to have to tidy this up. It's got a slightly sharp edge on here where it was butting up against the tape, so I'm going to take it out of the vise where it's kind of propped up there, give that a little sand, give the bottom end a little sand, just check there's nothing else that I need to address, and then I'm going to hang it up and prepare it for its first coat of an epoxy barrier coat. Well folks, as you can see, we have a hanging rudder that is all nice and clean, so I've got to resist touching it unless I put some gloves on, because I don't want to transfer any of the oils. It's quite a warm day today, any of the oils from my hand onto this. Now I know it's perfectly clean, having wiped it all down with acetone. I've also masked up around the stock, top and bottom, so it's time to coat it. Now I'm going to be coating it with a product you've probably seen before on this channel if you watch the series. This is Hempel High Protect. It is a solvent-free epoxy barrier coat. I prefer using this over the solvented ones like International Gel Shield, just because you only have to put 3, or if you really want to go belt and braces, 4 coats on, rather than the 5 to 6 or potentially more that you have to with a solvented epoxy. So there are less coats because you get more film thickness with this particular product when I apply. It also gives a really nice finish. It's really nice and easy to apply, and it doesn't stink of solvents. So in a small environment like this, in my little clean room, I don't have to wear a mask or respirator or anything like that. I can just paint it on, roll it out or whatever, and leave it to cure. So I will probably just paint it on with a 2-inch brush. That has worked very well in the past, and then leave the room to cure, and I'll come back again and put a second coat on tomorrow. So one thing that is slightly unusual about this product is its mixing ratio. So most epoxies are 3 to 1, 5 to 1, 4 to 1, something like that. This is 3 to 2, so 3 parts of the base to 2 parts of the hardener. So it's really easy to forget that if you are unused to using it. So it has to be mixed up. So I'll use a graduated mixing cup, put in maybe 60 millilitres of one and then 40 of the other to get the right proportions. I'm not sure if that's actually going to be enough. It probably need to be double that, but I will crack on with mixing up some epoxy barrier and get it applied. So cue the music and start the time lapse. first coat on, so it is looking about a million times better. You might even say it looks like a brand new rudder because it's pretty close to looking like one. It's going to get probably 4 coats. The manufacturer recommends 3 coats of the barrier coat to give adequate protection. I quite often put 4. I put 4 on the rest of Lottie's bottom. The reason for that is it allows me to buzz over it with the sander, which I will need to do prior to applying copper coat, so that there's a bit of a key for the copper coat to etch itself and hold on to when that is applied. And by having 4 coats, we're not removing the material that is there to protect the hull. So this will get 4 coats along with the rest of the hull. I probably won't bore you with lots of time lapses of me applying this, but I will show you the end result probably in a couple of days time. Then she'll be basically done and just need some nice new bearings and possibly some other bits and bobs ready to fit onto the boat. Just a reminder that if you are enjoying this content, then do please give me a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well. It does make a massive difference to the growth of my channel if you can do those things. They cost you absolutely nothing. They take less than a second and maybe possibly burn a calorie, maybe half a calorie, just pressing that button. So if you can do that, I really appreciate it. Well folks, we are back in the outside bit of my workshop, and we have what is now a slightly dirty, but it has had 3 coats of the epoxy barrier coat. We have a very slightly dirty rudder because it's been in the back of my van and it's been on the boat because I wanted to double check that it would fit, essentially, because I have obviously modified the leading edge here slightly, and I know that Contessa rudders can sometimes be a little bit tight just at the top here in terms of clearance, but we are all good. It is fine, apart from, and I knew this was likely to be a problem, the bearings that are in the boat were as loose as, thinking of something clean, very loose. And so I have just knocked them out. So that is the bottom bearing, that is the top bearing. Normally with Contessas, but not always, they are 2 what I call top hat bearings, because it kind of looks like a top hat. But on some boats where there's limited clearance, tends to be the slightly older boats, there isn't a rim on the top hat on the lower bearings. So I'm going to make up some new bearings. So I have a lathe over there, and a very nice man who used to make my bearings showed me how to make Contessa bearings and basically how to use my lathe and measure things very accurately so I can make rudder bearings. And so I have a big bar of acetal here, which is engineering plastic, and I'm going to chop a chunk of this off, stick it in my lathe and make some nice shiny new bearings, which will be a lovely snug fit on here, unlike the old ones which would rattle around all over the place, and also obviously be a nice snug fit up inside the tube on the boat. Now, I won't fit them until after I've done the copper coating, but I just figured we'll include it in this video and we'll get them all made so that we know that when the rudder goes on, everything is absolutely A1 perfect. If you're interested in such things, this is my lathe. As you can see, I did a really good job of cleaning up after the last job that I did on it, so I'm just going to have a quick tidy up and then get cracking on this. It's an old Colchester Bantam, this lathe, which is probably, you know, much older than me. I think it was probably built in the 60s. Well, I've cut some material and you can see it's in the lathe. I actually started by just facing off this end here just so that it's perfectly true, and then doing a bit of a cut, and then I could flip the material around and put it in the jaws, and now I know that is completely square to that. And I've just faced off this end as well, so that is all square and running true. And the next job is to bang a hole up the middle, which I can then enlarge to the correct size. It turns out that setting up a camera next to my lathe is not very easy just because of space, and I don't want to elbow anything or get myself caught in the machine, because I just spend most of my time when working on this machine thinking about all the ways it wants to either maim or kill me. So I am super careful with it, and I'm going to go and get my safety specs in a minute, because these, which I just used, are clearly not proper safety specs. I'm going to start by chucking a 10mm hole up the centre of the material, then I'm going to enlarge it with this thing, which is about a 15mm. It's an imperial drill, but it'll do the job, and then I will open it up from there using a cutting tool. Just bring that in closer, lock it off. Take it out of there. there we go, we have a hole. I expect that's quite hot. So with my hole made in there, I have just set up my cutting tool, which is, well, this chap here, which is going to go up inside that hole, and I'm going to draw it this way towards me to slowly open up the hole in there to the required size. Well, here are the old bearings that look pretty grotty and are very worn, and here are the shiny new bearings. So let's see how they fit. Here is the rudder. So here's one of the old bearings, and this was a very, very loose fit. I don't know if you can see that, but hopefully that was very oversized, and we'll go with this one. And that is just a nice snug fit on there, barely rocks at all, and I've made it ever so slightly oversized, a couple of thou over, because I know that when I push this into the tube it sits in, it will close up the hole very slightly. So this is about 4 thou over, something like that, because it will close up and then we'll have a nice snug fit. I have made them exactly to size before, and then they tighten up around the shaft and make it a little bit too tight, so slightly oversized will then fit once it's in position. As you can see, the rudder has had a fourth and final coat of the epoxy barrier, which is Hempel High Protect. Not sponsored, just a product I use. It works well. There's the two bearings that are sitting up there, just held in place with a bit of tape so they don't fall down, although they are a nice snug fit. I don't think they're going to fall too far on their own. I'm calling this project done, and I'm also calling this video done. If you support this channel financially, I'd just like to thank you again very, very much. If you want to do that, there's a link down in the description. It's a PayPal link where you can buy me a beer, or 2, or 3. It's entirely up to you. If you don't do that, like and subscribe, please. This is YouTube, you have to say that. Thumbs up, like, and hit the subscribe button. It does massively help the growth of my channel. Thank you very much. Do stay tuned. This is going to get copper coat at some point. I've still got to fit a Darglo prop. I've still got to rebuild the galley on Lottie. I've got some deck gear to fit. I've got a whole bunch of stuff. So do stay tuned. I hope you enjoyed my videos, and I will see you next time. Thanks very much. Bye for now.